Great. Okay, well, welcome to the Big Repair Project webinar. We've been fortunate to be invited to be part of the London Repair Week event. So this is a real privilege for us to sort of be able to kick off the project with you and to give you some insights into what we're seeing in the data from the study already. So I'm just going to flick through just to introduce the team. So this is our team at UCL. For anyone in the room who hasn't met us or received an email from me or from Mark, this is basically our team here at UCL who are working on all things repair and all things metal. So we're really focusing on this project to look at issues around repairability and home appliances. And some of the reasons why this is really important is because obviously appliances contain a lot of interesting special materials, including metals. And so we're interested to know about how you feel about repair, how you go about fixing things, how people find if it's easy or difficult to repair these kinds of objects in your life. Because there's a really big environmental impact associated with their waste. So really, this is the reason why we're kind of carrying out this research. And so our team here at UCL, Mark's a material scientist, I'm an architect and designer, Charnette's an LCA specialist, and Christian is doing a PhD on smart, sustainable materials. So how materials in the future might fix themselves. So we're all kind of looking at this aspect of objects, environmental impacts, and trying to understand how repair fits with all this. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, you described it brilliantly.
All right, cool. Okay. So we're going to take you through the sort of aim of today's webinar is really to take you through the project. So the Big Repair Project, a little bit about what it's for, and also what we're seeing already in the data. So this project is ongoing. It started in January, and really the reasons behind carrying out this work and this research was to try and tackle some of the nitty-gritty issues to do with current right to repair in the UK. So right to repair is a piece of legislation that was introduced last year in July, and it's a sort of first step towards making products more repairable and last longer, have a longer lifespan, and therefore trying to reduce the environmental impact of these objects. But it has issues at the moment. So we know currently this legislation covers a very limited set of products. So things like your smartphone, your laptop, your tablet, they're not covered yet. And obviously they're a big part of the sort of type of electronics that we use day to day. Currently, there's no price cap on spare parts, so we're interested in the study to find out about how much your repairs are costing you and how easy it is to get hold of things like spare parts in order to fix things. There's also an interesting issue with the current legislation that it supports professional repair service access to spare parts. It it's not designed at the moment to really support householder or community repair access to these things. So we want to know through the study, find out a little bit more about how you yourselves as householders or people who might be interested in repair, how do you feel about repairing stuff? What do you like repairing? What do you feel able to repair yourself? And we're also aware that there are wider issues to do with how VAT is currently charged on professional repairs. So part of our study actually asks you about the relative cost, the cost of repairing things. So giving us some insights into your day-to-day cost of repair. And these lovely little pictures on the right are lots of lovely objects that we're getting submitted into our into the gallery pages of the Big Repair Project. So if you take part in the study, as some of you already are doing so, you can upload some pictures of the things that break in your life and tell us a little bit about how you go about fixing them, take a photograph of the tools that you're using and of the kind of repair jobs that you're carrying out. So yeah, this is the website. So if anyone hasn't been to the website, this is it, www.bigrepairproject.org.uk, and you can click on there and find out and read a little bit more about the study in general. But in summary, it's about getting data on public opinions and behaviours about maintenance and repair of household appliances in the UK. And it started in January, so we're only sort of 2 months or so into the study. It's very early days and it's ongoing. At the moment, we have research funding from the UKRI to carry this out until 2024. So really, we're really excited to see how the project develops, the kinds of information that we're going to receive from you all. And obviously, the more uptake and the more participation we can get from the UK public, the better. So if you can help us by spreading the word, that would be amazing. But so far, it's been pretty good. We've had a really good number of responses. So about 5,000 surveys have been filled out online. And we've had about 200 home repair activities logged in our logbook, which is a sort of chance to get a bit more of a detailed insight into how you're finding repairing objects. And if anyone's interested, if this project is part of the wider research programme from the UKRI Interdisciplinary Centre for Circular Metals, and there's the website if you want to have a look at for more details. And this image on the right is a snapshot from our map page, which is basically citing, showing roughly whereabouts all our participants are sort of coming from at the moment. So at the moment, we've got quite a big push from the southeasterners on repair, but we obviously would like to get a more democratic range of people taking part in the project across the UK. So first of all, just to sort of set the scene, the way that we talk about in the study, the way that we talk about electronics, because there's obviously lots of different types of electronics or appliances that you use in your home, that we're trying to sort of understand a bit more of the detail about how different kinds of appliances, how you might relate to them slightly differently. So we've broadly got these categories of large appliances. So that's the stuff that big objects that do the sort of housekeeping tasks, such as washing machines, dishwashers and fridges. We've got a category about small appliances, which is about the sort of smaller or portable things that you use for doing household chores. So things like kettles or toasters, microwaves, vacuums, that kind of thing. And then we've got a slightly different category, which is home electronics. And those are the sort of electronic devices that you use for things like entertainment or communication. So it's things like your laptop, your smartphone, your radio, your camera, things like that. So really, we've got a range of questions and a range of data that we'd like to share with you today. And if anyone, as we're talking, wants to pop some questions into the Q&A box, we've got Charnette on hand here to help us post some questions at the end, so we can take a few questions and try and respond to your queries about it. But we'll just go through all the questions, all the data, and try and sort of share with you what's currently happening, what we're seeing. Before I do that, Mark, do you want to add anything at this point?
No, it's good. I think
Yeah.
it's all great. We can have this discussion at the end.
Yeah, great, perfect.
And discuss it. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so first question in our surveys that we asked participants was about their ownership of appliances, and this is quite an interesting question for us because the way how you own something has implications on how you behave towards it. So how you look after it, how you repair it even. So we can currently see that within the range of ownership categories, most people who are taking part in the study own their stuff. They own their phone, they own their washing machine. But we have quite a large proportion of people who also rent these appliances. So we can see that there's about 70% range of people who rent large appliances like your washing machine or fridge. There's also quite a large number of people who also have their large appliances included in the home rental agreement. So if you rent a flat or a house, often your large appliance, your washing machine will be part of that. So there's an interesting range, and I think this is quite a good thing to sort of establish to understand how do people relate differently to these things if they own it or rent it, or if it's included in their rental agreement. And then we asked a question about how much the following factors influence your purchase or rental of home appliances. So really these were about sort of getting some more information about how people feel towards these influences on their point of purchase or rental. And so everything green roughly says it's very influential or somewhat influential. Everything in red is not very influential. So you can see broadly the kind of proportion of greens across those categories. You can see that they're at least 50%, if not more, influential in terms of what they do when they purchase or buy something. So cost and warranties and spare parts and repair information, those things are all having an influence on how people buy things. And then we asked, how long do you expect different home appliances to last? This is a kind of coverall to understand, well, how do you feel about large appliances versus small versus home electronics? Is there a difference there? And yes, there is. So it turns out the most number of people who, the highest number of people who said, I think this is this much of a product lifespan, they said that large appliances should last about 10 years. Similarly, for small appliances, they said about 10 years, but most number of people, most common response was that home electronics should last about 5 years. So we know that there's a kind of broad, at the moment, an expectation that these appliances do last differently, and the reasons for that are quite varied. And so the next question we've asked people is about, well, why do you replace them? So what's your reason for replacing these things at the end of their lifespan? And so what we can see that the kind of most common response was there are things like it's cheaper to buy a new one than repair it. So there's an issue around the cost of items in terms of how much they cost when they're new versus, say, repairing them or doing something else with them. So that's a sort of common response. The kind of most common response was it's difficult to get hold of spare parts. So we know that there's a difficulty there with the way that parts are accessed or provided from manufacturers or suppliers. So there's always an issue there at home. So we wanted to find out a little bit more about how people feel about the different levels of repair. When we say level of repair, it's how do you feel, what kind of complexity of repair are you happy to sort of carry out at home yourselves? So kind of quite a large proportion of our participants answered actually they were happy to do some basic form of repair, something like maintaining something, so cleaning it. A large proportion of people are also happy to do some basic repair and complex repair and advanced repair. So this is really interesting for us to know, because it means that in terms of the people taking part in the study currently, that they're actually interested in lots of different types of repair and different complexities of repair. And what was kind of interesting as well is that in terms of the categories of not likely to repair, so people who said, I'm not likely to repair any of these appliances, the highest number were for home electronics. So it's a curious one to see that people were less likely to try and repair home electronics themselves. So then the next question, we wanted to ask some sort of value statements about your home, your household. So basically asking how strongly do you agree or disagree with these statements? So one really standout set of information here already is that most people really strongly agree that online guides like iFixit and YouTube make it more likely for their household to fix home appliances. So there's clearly like a source of information and access to information which is really fundamentally important for householders, and it's helping them to kind of carry out some of these repair activities. What we can see a strong disagreement about the statement about it's easy to get hold of spare parts. So again, this is sort of reinforcing this information that householders themselves are finding it really difficult to either access the parts themselves or potentially to get hold of them through different kind of routes or sources. So this is a really important thing, because obviously it's a very important part of repairing things. Then we asked a similar set of questions, but we wanted to know how people at home, the general public, feel about employing a professional repairer. So someone who's has an expertise and does it for a living. How do you feel about engaging with professional repairers? And we can see that one on the left-hand side of people who said they weren't likely to repair any of these devices using professional repair services, quite a large chunk said they weren't likely to use professional repair services for small appliances, so things like kettles and toasters. So it's an interesting thing to sort of watch this space as the study develops, to see whether there are any trends to do with how people feel about repairing things professionally according to different appliances. And we can see for the others that there's a sort of a mixed range of people kind of saying they probably would, if they needed to, they would probably hire a professional repairer to do some maintenance or some basic repair. And then, so this study, this part of the study, this figure is really showing that, again, the sort of the opinion statements about professional repair services. So one really interesting thing is that it makes people feel they have a strong agreement with supporting repair businesses, makes them feel positive, which is a really interesting one, actually, because if there are some other valued benefits to repair, so things like mental health or well-being, surely these are really important categories that we should consider in policy making in the future. Is there a place to sort of consider that maybe repairing something because it makes you feel good, or you benefit in some other way, not just financially or environmentally? That's a really important category for us. Maybe we should start talking about this thing when we're talking about policy development. And then strong disagreement. So it's affordable. So I mean, about sort of 40%, just over 40% of people said they didn't think it was that affordable to use professional repair services. And again, this is going back to this issue around VAT potentially. So if VAT is also adding an extra cost onto some of these repair activities, there's a strong consideration there that if we want to drive and generate more repair happening in the UK, then we need to tackle some of these issues around VAT and make it more affordable. So we asked a sort of standalone question, just a sort of general understanding of, if you use professional repair, which kinds of professional repair services do you prefer to use? And there's a really strong trend at the moment in the data that is saying that people would prefer to use independent repair shop services as opposed to a manufacturer. This is quite an interesting one, because obviously at the moment we'll probably need to make distinct changes, or quite large changes, in terms of how independent repairers are supported in order to increase and encourage repairability and repair of household appliances. So this is interesting. There's obviously a strong interest in using these services more. And we also asked about who, in terms of everyone who's taking part, who's heard of, who knows about UK Right to Repair. And I know I introduced it at the beginning of this webinar, but a lot of the people who are coming through the website at the moment, they are aware of it. They sort of understand that it's something that's aimed at increasing the lifespan of home appliances. So, but potentially we might have a question here about some bias in the study at the moment, because it's early days, and this is definitely something that we're going to try and kind of combat through the way that we advertise, share, get people involved in the study, and to try and make sure that we have a much wider and democratic sample of people across the UK. So then we asked the question of, what do you do with home appliances that you can't fix? So what do you decide to do with them at that point? So quite a lot of people take them to recycling centres. There's a large proportion of people who are saying that they engage with those waste management services. Quite a lot of people also doing things like repurposing them, using waste collection services. Interestingly, though, there are quite a significant number of people who are throwing some of these items in their general waste bin, or they're leaving some of these items outside for someone else to take. And obviously we can see that the blue category and leaving something outside is large appliances. So a large portion of people who answered under that category, they're leaving large appliances, so things like fridges or washing machines outdoors. And this is actually kind of an interesting one to know, because it's quite problematic when you leave something like an electronic device outside in the weather, because if it gets wet, or if it starts rusting, or if you put it in general waste and it gets sort of mixed with other things, it becomes very difficult to repair and repurpose that object so that you can use it again. So if we know that there are these issues where people sort of feeling like they have to throw it in general waste. Well, we need to, I think about exploring and supporting other methods or other ways that people can access repair services or repurposing services for their appliances. So then we've got a question here about, would any of these incentives motivate or enable our participants to repair home appliances? So we asked, would any of these ideas, and a lot of these ideas have come from kind of reading around, seeing how different initiatives, different discussions with manufacturers, with policymakers, with the public, sort of understanding of what kinds of sort of initiatives might allow you to repair more, or enable you or motivate you to repair more. So top of these kinds of categories, the UK repairability rating seems to be very popular with participants. And by that we mean some kind of rating system that allows you, when you buy a product, to understand just how easy it is to repair that thing. So that's kind of an interesting exercise, but obviously it's sort of popular initiative, but we need to think about how that would be developed, about what would be the sort of design of that system. And the other popular items, the other popular categories were, so getting better access to affordable spare parts. So how can we do that? Well, this is a conversation to have with parts suppliers, manufacturers. It's a conversation about just logistics, but it's also a conversation about cost. So yeah, so talking about how we might start to incentivize that access to affordable spare parts. And the other category that was a really popular one was about accessing free repair information. So the knowledge of how you take something apart, what do you need to fix it, how do you put it back together again. And so we can see with some of the other responses and other questions in the survey that things like free online guides, like the iFixit or the YouTube guides out there, they're really popular because it allows people to access this information for free in their own time. It allows them to kind of digest the information and use it when they want to fix stuff. So how can that initiative be supported in the future? Now on to the kind of logbook side of the study. So for everyone or anyone who hasn't taken part in it yet, the general setup in the repair project is that to take our survey, you give us some very interesting and useful information about your opinion and behaviour towards repairing stuff. But then if you want to get more involved, you can sign up for a logbook account, which is basically an account which allows you to log repairs that you've done in the past and show us some more detail about how you found it, how did you diagnose the problem, what were the tools that you used, how much did it cost you. So this is some photographs that people have submitted from the logbook study so far. So we've got a range of things, interesting range of appliances being shared with us. So this is probably the text is a little small on this one, but there is an amazing range of things that people are trying to fix, which is quite well, it's brilliant to see that there's a huge number of people who are trying to fix dishwashers and washing machines. We've got laptops, phones. We've got all sorts of sort of curious things like I think we've got some. One was making me laugh the other day. Oh, we've got a mouse, that's good. Got a saw, some sort of like scanning equipment. So yeah, a huge range of very interesting items that people clearly care enough about to actually sort of try and fix them. But what's also great about the logbook is that you can share extra bits of detail about how this process, how you found it. So this initial question, when you take part in the logbook and you log a repair activity, how was the problem diagnosed? So we can see from 286 activities that people have logged so far, quite a lot of people seem to be quite pro at this already. So we have quite a lot of people who already knew what the problem was. They've self-diagnosed it, they've figured it out. But we've got quite a lot of people who also have been searching online. So again, kind of interesting to see that people are using online facilities for repair information, and they're using it in order to kind of figure out what to do. And then a few other interesting ones. So asking repair professionals, either independent traders or manufacturers. We've got people who are asking their friends and family. So if anyone has expertise in their household and they're kind of asking around. Physical product manuals. So I think there are still a lot of products out there that get delivered to you with some kind of product manual, and so people are looking in those things to find out some of this important information. So yeah, a range there. And then we asked a slightly different question, is where did you find information to carry out the activity? So it's not just about diagnosing the problem, but how did you actually find out the information to repair something? So again, a lot of people already knew. Seems to be sort of reinforcing this information about online repair being a really significant part of this process. But also people asking like shop assistants, as someone who's asked a shop assistant there, and again asking repair professionals. So there's an interesting sort of range here. And then we asked a little bit of detail about the level of maintenance and repair that these logbook activities are sort of pitched at. So just asking an honest opinion whether someone feels that this activity is maintenance, or is it basic repair, or is it more complex, or is it more advanced? And so we've got quite an interesting range. So people taking part in the study are currently attempting a range of complexities of repair over a range of different appliances, so large, small, and home electronics. So yeah, I think this is really interesting. Obviously, we need more data, but there's some interesting ideas coming out of this about the fact that if people, a range of people taking part, actually are interested in doing a variety of complexity of repair, then how would we support that? How can you support a range of different types of repair, different complexities of repair, so that householders can engage with this activity? We also asked a little bit of information about cost. So at the moment, out of these 286 activities, the majority of the kind of costs for each individual activity has been sort of under a tenner, between £0 and £10. We've got quite a few sort of 10 to 20, 20 to £30. A couple of over 100 plus £100 activities happening. It's also interesting to see the relative proportion related to the different appliance types. So when we get into the kind of 20 to £30 marker, it's quite a large majority of these large appliance type items. That's the sort of cost that we're getting into with those. A slightly smaller proportion of the other two. So yeah, we'll keep watching the space and collecting more data, hopefully, so we'll get a better idea overall how much these kinds of repairs, what types of complexity of repair, how much it's sort of costing people at home. And then we asked a little question at the end to just understand, well, what was the result of it? So did your repair, did it work, or did you have to sort of think of another kind of purpose for it? So lots of people managed to fix them so that their item was still functioning and they could keep using it, and therefore extending the lifespan of that product. Quite a few people were saying that they recycled their items. So if they couldn't repair it for whatever reason, they were seeking out some recycling facilities to actually sort of give their products away. Some people sold them, some people repurposed them. There's a few there that are sort of storing them at home. That's quite an interesting one for us to see, that what do you do if you don't sort of fix a product? And I know I'm certainly kind of one for doing this with mobile phones, for instance. I think, I don't know who amongst us has this cupboard full of phones that don't work anymore, but don't really know what to do with them because you're still quite attached to them. So it's interesting to see, like, if people are storing these items at home, there's a huge cache or kind of store of these very like valuable materials, but also very kind of emotionally very important objects. So what do we do with that? Do we need to find a way that people can kind of feel more confident to let go of them? How do we do that? Do we need to support people in terms of some of the security aspects around recycling your mobile phone or repurposing a laptop, for instance? So these are interesting questions that we'll start to kind of look into more as the study continues. And then overall, this is also the last data slide from the logbook that we wanted to ask. So how did people find this activity overall? So each repair activity that they've logged, how easy was it or how difficult? And this is quite interesting because we're seeing quite a range of spread of some people finding these things easy or somewhat easy, and some people also finding them quite difficult. So there is no kind of there's sort of no like magic bullet with any of these things. So sometimes repair, depending on the complexity of it or the object or your knowledge of repair, can find something harder or more difficult. But in terms of what we might sort of think about with this information is that if people want to approach, different people want to approach repair differently, and they want to have the choice to repair some things and not others, then it's all about kind of thinking about this choice. How do we kind of support people in terms of policy development? How can we support people to have the choice and the ability and the access to some of these facilities in order to be able to carry out some repair? Okay, so that's the end of the very chunky data reporting bit. And so just a bit of information, if anyone wants to actually go to the website and take part, which would be brilliant, or just read about the project and read a little bit more about right to repair, then it's bigrepairproject.org.uk. If anyone wants to find out more information about our team and the team at UCL who are researching this issue, you can go to plasticwastehub.org.uk. And if anyone has any questions about the project or wants to ask anything about sort of how to take part, then you can email me, and my email's at the bottom. So now I'm going to open up the webinar hosting to Mark and Charlotte as well. So we thought at this stage, we've got about 20 minutes or so that we can have a discussion if there are any questions from anyone who wants to write any questions in the Q&A box. And we can have a chat about some of them.
Cool. So I've been looking at the chat for the question and answers. So there's a couple of ones on spares or that I want to group up together. So Graham has said that he's worked a lot on medical technology repair, and he found that a lot of equipment that could easily be repaired will fit spares, but he hasn't seen any effort in this direction, and whether there's any information on will fit spares out there. And on top of that, Chris has talked about asked whether in the future is it more likely that folks will be selling their broken items to repairers to then sell on, and whether we should be making those who just throw things in the bin to just to say there could be value in to just sell them on as spares as well. So do you guys have any comments on that, Daniel and Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the medical technology is a really good point. So we also, as part of a sister project to this, are working in Kenya and a few other countries where the repair culture is a much bigger part of the commercial normal practice, and in particular in hospitals. You know, the budgets are not there to just buy the latest scanner every 3 years, and so maintaining their existing medical equipment in those environments for 10, 20 years is absolutely standard, and getting these equipment, I mean, the people involved are amazingly resourceful. It is about getting hold of spare parts, and what we hear on the ground is that this is getting harder and harder because new versions of those scanners come along, and they're really not designed to be maintained for that period of time, and they have much more integrated software, which we'll get onto with another question, I think, which is making this problem harder to kind of resolve. About the spare parts on eBay, I mean, I think that was one of the things I found very heartening about the data so far, is that actually there's some, people have all sorts of problems about social media and so on, but actually in the repair space, it really is proving to be an absolutely fantastic resource, both in terms of information, how to repair things, and it's energizing, and it's giving people, it's upskilling people and giving them confidence, but it's also providing a method to go and get spare parts, and I've done that on eBay too. One of the things I think we need to look into as we go on in this project is how to get more people to engage in taking the stuff out of their home that they no longer want and making it available as a part. And I guess that affects both these two questions, which is like in a hospital environment or even in a university environment. I noticed in my own university that, you know, when a piece of equipment goes wrong or it is not being used anymore, whose job is it to make to get those, either take it apart for spare parts and get them onto the market so other people can use it, or to advertise the whole thing? And I think those kind of systems approaches in organizations like hospitals and universities and big companies and small companies, so that people, you know, it's actually an effort, right? And no one's going to get any credit for it and probably not very much money for it. So that's why it doesn't happen. But we need incentives in the system. And I think that's one of the questions we would be looking at from a policy perspective, which is how to incentivize those organizations to either make income from the spare parts or the broken materials, or to get some other benefit from it, to incentivize more of that behavior.
Cool. Daniel, do you want to add to that?
I think, yeah, we'll
Cool. I guess like to follow on from that, I guess Alan have followed up on some components for repair are only sold in quantity, which makes single item repair uneconomical. Could their staff enrichment or more specialized professional repair capacity generate economies of scale and make repairs more affordable?
Yeah, I mean, I guess these are the sort of research questions that we would like, as we're not the only researchers in this space looking at this, and I think that those are the kind of questions we would like to answer. I think that when you look at sort of countries like the UK, where the professional repair space and certainly the high street repair space used to be a bigger part of the overall economy and has shrunk as essentially as design for repair has become a sort of has become a less common, and integrated electronics for things like printers and scanners and phones and cameras have made the repair more expensive because of the amount of time it takes, and it feels to me that has then impacted the provision of spare parts, because there isn't a big market in this country for the professional repair anyway. And it's been a sort of detrimental circle. So companies are just not wanting to support repair because it's not a money-making exercise for them, and in fact quite the reverse. So they can design for obsolescence with a number of ways of doing that, and get repeat purchases of the same functionality. So people are constantly rebuying scanners, constantly rebuying printers, and so on. And that the only people that doesn't suit, it seems, is anyone who wants to look after the environment, and the citizen who's bought it, who actually just wants to be able to scan something or print something reliably for a period of time of 10 to 20 years. But the lifespans of these objects are not being supported for that length of time intentionally. And how do we reverse that? It's not going to happen by just being spare parts being available. It has to be, those companies are going to have to make money from repair more than selling new things, and that requires a wholesale change in the business model and the relationship with the customer, which is, I think the big companies are now starting to get it, and but it's a big change in the commercial culture around a lot of these companies who make everything from toasters to phones.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now let's talk about the software update. So both Lewis and Alan have mentioned that people do get rid of electronic items because of software updates, and it's the software that affects the repairability of these electronic devices. This needs, Alan said that this needs to be aligned with physical spare parts availability, which is often longer than the software. Is this planned to be considered by any review of legislation? I think this is a complex issue with many considerations to take account of.
Yeah, so so that is on the agenda for right to repair legislation, and it is one of the crucial issues. Absolutely right to say that many items in the electronics sector are essentially not repairable because they're not supported by software updates. It is something that lots of countries are grappling with, and I think it's a tricky one because it's about who pays, I suppose, or if we're a country which allows companies to sell products into this country, and we have warranties which those companies issue, but we also have a legal requirement for those products to operate for a certain period of time. But those periods of time are relatively short, 1 or 2 years, and after that you're kind of essentially on your own, and the relationship with the company is the one in which is going to ensure that you get software updates or not. So how would we encourage a company that's selling mobile phones, for instance, to ensure 10-year software updates for any phone they issue? Well, at the moment, there's very little requiring them to do that, except for customer satisfaction. But we're in a kind of mode where people, and then as we saw with the data, people are not expecting their phones to last more than 5 years. And I don't know whether that's a reasonable expectation or not, but it feels like there's a kind of relationship between what the customer expects and what the companies will give you. And so this 5-year horizon of software updates for a phone seems to be sort of roughly where the big companies are. And that then prevents companies trying to, and people having their expectations exceeded to a 10-year lifespan of a phone, which when you look at the life cycle assessments and how much energy and resources are used for a phone, feels like where we need to be in the next 10 years. So how do we kind of, this does feel to me like an area where legislation would really help, because the market isn't delivering it. And having a period of time when software updates will be guaranteed for any company that sells over a certain number of products, whether it be a games console, which have extremely small lifespans, or a smartphone, a tablet, excuse me, sorry, I'm gonna get some water, sorry, I'll come back, it's a bit dusty.
So yeah, Danielle, do you want to follow on? Oh yeah.
Yeah, sorry, we're doing some muting logistics here. Yeah, I think this idea of expectation is an interesting one to unpick. So, and it's also kind of a bit chicken and egg. So I think that what Mark was sort of saying there was about, well, why do we expect a phone to maybe last 5 years? Why do we expect a large appliance like a washing machine to last 10 years or longer? And that's really kind of a complex one, because it can be about what you've learnt before, which might not necessarily be the way that it has to be in the future. So do we expect things to last 5 years because that's what's happened in the past, but potentially some of those issues around why a phone or how a phone could potentially last longer and therefore reduce its overall environmental impact, or how would you sort of tackle that? So it might be to do with the kind of the sort of physical stuff. So it's like the wear and tear of something, what commonly breaks on a phone, for instance. So I know from my own experience, like I smash the screen more often than not, but everything else inside, the kit inside, is still good to go and will still keep running. But I know also this kind of like the software side of it, so the sort of the running of this kind of physical stuff, that the software is incredibly powerful, because if that's not kind of secure, that if that's not able to kind of maintain security updates and to actually kind of handle the sort of the kind of digital stuff that I want to kind of access, then it's not doing what I want it to do anymore, and that's kind of a frustration. So yeah, thinking about, how can we increase the lifespan of something like a phone through clever design in terms of the physical stuff. So, I mean, maybe we need to make things like the screen's more repairable, or more easily repairable, or the battery should be really simple to replace, because that's also a really common failure on a mobile phone. But then also, yeah, like we're saying about the sort of software side of things, well, what are the limitations of software design? Is it easy enough to actually sort of try and maintain longer periods of upgrades for these items? Could we up that to 10 years? What's capping it at 5 at the moment? And is that the main issue? So I think it's really powerful data that we're starting to kind of bring in through the project, and we'll go towards supporting these conversations with people who can change the infrastructure, the system, the policy that these things are kind of bought and sold and used within.
And yeah, it's interesting to note, when we had the round table with the manufacturers back in November, they were very keen to say that if customers want this, they will give it to them. That they're so customer focused that if we want this, they'll give it to us. And we were like, well, but shouldn't you be doing it anyway because of environmental concerns? And they were like, well, it's very hard for companies to do that because they will just make a loss and then they'll be out of business. That was the general rationale. I mean, if you take it at face value, it means that what we would need to do is for all of us to have a sort of disgust that we're having to constantly throw out things that essentially, from a functional point of view, I can see in the questions, we've all got computers that are perfectly working in terms of their hardware, but they're basically going out of business for us because of the software updates. And I think we have to really protest about that. I think we have to support the companies that are helping to prolong products for longer in our homes. So I think there needs to be a big upsurge in demand to send a signal to these companies that we do want this. But on the other hand, I really honestly feel like legislation is going to be another, there's got to be a carrot and stick here, that they'll get our business if they make stuff last longer. But I think that the legislation actually is probably going to be more effective because, once the companies are told you've got to make a smartphone that is software supported for 10 years, people will keep them for 10 years and that will become the norm. And people, so I think it's a combination of citizens rising up and being disgusted, to be honest, because we are a very wasteful society. And we sort of sleptwalked into this situation.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I guess to follow on from that, Peter has said this, that design for repair sounds great, but is there any evidence that this is being adopted widely? It sits alongside with design for everything else. Is it likely that we will in the future only lease all these items for a short time with a commitment from the manufacturer to take it back? Should we encourage good behavior by taxing heavily the use of all new materials?
Yes. Well, taxing materials is probably where it's going to go, because they're going to be a scarce resource in terms of the embodied carbon in them. As it becomes more expensive to dig them out of the ground, I'm sure that will happen. The renting product, that seems to be a logical way forward to address some of these problems. So rent your washing machine, don't buy it. And then it's in the company's interest to keep it going for longer. We have talked to the manufacturers about this. There doesn't seem to be many examples yet where that's taking off. The case studies or the small pilot studies that they say they've done have not encouraged them in that. Except the exception, of course, is cars, where cars for a long time leasehold has been a very viable business model, and probably will get more so with electric, because so much of the value of a car will be in the lithium batteries that the companies will want to hang on to that and not sell it to you anyway. And it could, when it comes down to things like phones and toasters and kettles, one of the questions, I guess, is about wear and tear. Like, you know, how much less do you look after something that you don't own is a question, isn't it? And does it kind of lead us into a world where people don't take care of stuff because they don't own any of it, and there's no incentive for them to do so? And I think that behavior side of this change in business practice, I think, is something that there's not very much data out on. So again, it's a really good question, but it's a hard one to assess. In terms, if we compare with the startups in the in fashion, so there's quite a lot of startups now in fashion renting clothes to people. So if you want to go out on a fancy night out, you rent your clothes, you go on a fancy night out, and you give it back to them, and you pay just for that night out, the clothes. And it'd be really interesting to see if that business model starts to grow, and that people's actual wardrobes at home shrink to functional, you know, workwear and casual wear, and whether that then, you know, people get, if that starts to work, then maybe there'll be confidence in the market to move it towards things like other aspects of electronics. Or so I think a lot's happening, but it's just sort of, it's people's behavior and their desire for it that seems to be uncertain at the moment. Is that fair enough, Danielle?
Yeah, I think the cost of rental or service models, sometimes they're called service models, that's a big one. And I think because it's such a niche initiative at the moment, there aren't that many people out there. And it's also because when you talk about a service model, a company or manufacturer or a supplier has to have in place all the infrastructure behind the scenes needed to track that item from their warehouses or whatever through your kind of whether you buy it online or for a shop to you, but also to be able to track that object, whether it's clothing or a phone or a washing machine. They need to be able to track that and understand how you've used it, and also what you did to it when you were using it day to day, in order to be able to kind of take it back from you at some point when you no longer want to use that thing. And then to be able to put it back into their system of repurposing or cleaning it up or re-renting it out again. And so from a company perspective, it's quite hard to set up a fully functioning system at the moment that's cost effective, because a lot of these things aren't mainstream. So at the moment, I think we're at a point where it's really important to kind of make or understand case studies. So companies which are trying it, to understand where are the efficiencies, where are the things that work in this sort of service model use, and to spot where the things that aren't quite working. Why does it end up costing me so much more to kind of rent this dress or to rent this washing machine per month over a lifetime? Because if it exceeds a certain threshold of cost, it's not going to be affordable for most people, and therefore it's a barrier to actually adopting a different way of owning or relating to an object. So I think that one massive thing that research in this area can do now is to start trying to kind of analysing case studies where companies are actually trying this stuff, and trying to compare them. So one company's case study might be slightly different from another, and trying to understand the differences because of where they are. One company's in the UK, the other one might be in France. What are the differences and the complexities around each service model and each company's behavior? So I think it's really exciting to see these things starting, but they're not easy to adopt yet, because I think they're too expensive, and they don't function very conveniently yet.
And I guess the other bit of that, I mean, I totally agree with you, Daniel. I think the other bit of that case study thing is to look at what degree of taxing, because essentially the disposable model for most of these goods is essentially at the expense of the environment. So what level of tax of that waste will then make these rental models profitable? And because surely that is going to happen. Okay, that wasteful behavior is going to get taxed in the end. And I think that's the other factor, which is that we could sort of have a model and see how much tax you need to change the balance.
The other thing I would just add to this point is that when you start developing new infrastructures for service models, suddenly you're talking about lots of different kinds of jobs. So there's this very interesting aspect to how a circularity in a system, whether it's about repairing things or renting them and then giving them back to the manufacturer, but as soon as you start setting up a different use system for these objects, then suddenly you need people to carry out that cleaning, you need people to kind of fix those things in a warehouse. And it has this potential across the UK, certainly, to actually start doing what the government calls this idea of levelling up. So to try and expand and introduce new job opportunities for people across the UK. So it's not only, it's not only sort of an environmental issue in terms of its emissions or other impacts. Actually, circularity and circular thinking has the potential to actually have real social impact as well in terms of education and jobs and welfare. So yeah, it's a really interesting, a conundrum, but hopefully a really interesting sort of path for these kinds of solutions.
I can see that this is, as usual with these things, we've got loads of really interesting questions we haven't got around to, and tons of people are engaging. That's a shame because we're out of time.
But what we can do, so for anyone who's posted a question, what we'll do is we'll just download them from the webinar, and then we'll respond to them, sort of a written response, and post it on the website, and we'll send out an email about that. And we'll also post the recording of this, so for anyone who's missed it and wants to hear about it, they can catch up.
I suppose the main thing to say is that we've just started this research, and the thing we've noticed is just how much enthusiasm and engagement people have for this topic. I think people are fed up with being sold stuff that becomes obsolete in 6 to 12 or 24 months. And people want change. And the question is, so it's great that everyone's come to this webinar, and we're looking forward to continuing this conversation with you over the next few years.
Definitely. And just a last little plug is that if anyone hasn't taken part, please, you could go to the website, take part. It takes 10 minutes. Hopefully you've seen that it's not too scary. It's data that you can sort of share with us. It will go a long way to helping support these arguments, these conversations. And if you have any questions about it, you can email me. My email's at the bottom there. Great. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Shawnette.
Thanks.
Christian. See you next time.